Salutations and welcome, horse racing fans, and welcome to this episode of Capping the Card on NYRA Bets YouTube. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel to get handicapping tutorials, betting tutorials, race previews, as well as episodes like this, Capping the Card. If you're not familiar, the premise of Capping the Card is myself and a guest will go through every race on a particular day's card. We'll give you our top pick. We'll also give you our top value play for every single race. Today, we're focused on the Belmont Derby Day card, and that is taking place Saturday, July 6th at Belmont at the Big A. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that my very first episode of Capping the Card took place almost 2 years ago. It was for the Pennsylvania Derby, and I had a very special guest on that day. And I thought it was only appropriate to bring the same guest back for this first episode of Capping the Card on NYRA Bets. And that is, of course, NYRA's own Sara Elbadwi. Sara, thank you so much for joining me on this episode and going through the Belmont Derby Day card with me.
Of course. I mean, how could I not? I feel like it was a gift that you left your tripod at home for me to steal and set up in the corner here while you have that nice backdrop still behind you. But I'm super excited that the YouTube channel has started out well. You've definitely put in a lot of time and work and countless hours into that, as well as a lot of thought process as well. So it's good to see that have some good feedback generated so far. And it'll be a fun stakes action filled card on Saturday. I unfortunately won't be there in person. I will be going out to Horseshoe Indianapolis for the Indiana Derby, but really is looking forward to catching up on what's going on with the races here at NYRA in between.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that, I was just talking with John Dooley, of course, the voice of Horseshoe Indy earlier today. And that race preview for the Indiana Oaks and Indiana Derby is up on the NYRA Bets YouTube channel as well. And we were talking about that as well as some of the other races on that card. That should be a really jam-packed day. And we'll be excited to see you on location at Shelbyville, Indiana for that big day. But listen, let's dive into the Belmont Derby Day card, and we'll start with the very first race, which is a $90,000 maiden special weight for 2-year-olds going 5.5 furlongs on the dirt. And I promise, folks, Sara and I are not going to agree in every race, but this one felt a little bit tough to get around. The morning line favorite, number 5, Showcase at 8-5 for Todd Pletcher. Sara, as the guest, I'll let you go first. What attracted you to this particular horse?
Connections in the short price that you're going to have to eat aside. This is a very win early type of dam side pedigree, with the dam being buy, sell, hold. One that we saw be very, very precocious when trained by Steve Asmussen, and then kind of tailed off a little bit as she got older. And that's not something we see quite as often from Steve Asmussen's horses. He's really efficient at developing the horse throughout their career from 2 to 3 to 4 and so on. And so this seems like a pedigree that's meant to strike early and maybe one that you might want to play against going forward. But this is the time where this is a horse that is likely to be running pretty well, be more that precocious type, be a little bit ahead of their peers, and the peers will eventually catch up. But for now, it seems that this one is working well by Uncle Mo, so certainly capable of getting a first-time starter ready to go. We know that he was a capable 2-year-old, and I just couldn't build a strong case for another alternative in this spot other than Showcase. So boring way to start things out for me, but I thought that this one seemed very live going into start Saturday's card.
Yeah, I agree. Buy, sell, hold also has one other race full, Bourbon Bash, who likes to finish second a lot, but is a very good horse and is a stakes caliber horse and an allowance level horse. So that's a horse that's been a really honest runner for quite a while. So I thought that was something to note. I do like the Bullet gate work 2 back on June 21st. Always like seeing these 2-year-olds with a really strong gate work leading into their debut, just to show, hey, we got this cleaned up. I also don't like seeing repetitive gate works because that usually indicates maybe there's an issue, even if the work itself looks fast. So I was glad to see, listen, there were a couple of gate works early. There were one last one before we get going, and I think that's a good setup there. I couldn't really make a case for the number 1, Tis Freedom at 5-2, and I wasn't really that sold on John Kimmel's horse, number 3, Protected, either. Ultimately, my value play in this race was the number 4, Jerry's Out for Rudy Rodriguez. This is a horse that's had a couple nice gate works. I mentioned liking that. And if you go back, look at that June 26th work, 47-2, 4 furlong Bullet gate work, first of 39 that day. This is one who, the dam has produced some nice runners, a horse like Prove Worthy, who's kind of an allowance level horse. There's not a ton of first out success in this family, but it's a relatively short field of only 6. 5-1 feels like a relatively honest price that might actually float up a little bit. And Rudy had a 2-year-old that debuted on Thursday on Independence Day who actually ran pretty well. So I just going to take a shot with this barn, 5-1, maybe just a horse to play underneath. You identified an Iowa bred, maybe already getting ready for your trip out to the Midwest for your value play here, number 2, Cyclone State.
Yeah, I gotta start early, right? And have the Hoosiers in my favor as well as those other Midwesterners. But look, this is not necessarily a win early type of outfit. They don't have excellent numbers or stellar ones with their 2-year-olds going first time out. But I thought it was intriguing that Chad Summers reached out for Tyler Gaffalione to ride. It's not something that you see all that often in terms of a jockey trainer combination. And while it's not exactly prolifically successful, I think that the small sample size is worth noting for Tyler to get on a 2-year-old for Gold Square and have that horse be one that he wants to ride in the first race on Saturday here in New York. The pedigree is okay. There's some win early pedigree on the dam side as well for this one. We kind of have that theme throughout of this race of those newer stallions that we don't really know what we're going to get from them just yet in terms of just how precocious their offspring might be or how capable they might be in terms of getting those 2-year-olds ready to go and run for the races. And we don't really know how good they're going to be at different things just yet, whether they're going to be a stellar turf sire or a dirt router only, or really excel at synthetics. And we'll see what we end up getting from McKinsey long term. But I thought that there was at least enough on the dam side and enough of an interesting jockey move to try to put this one into my exotics. But I don't really see the case for this one to get the win over Showcase.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think this one's going to be interesting to see who runs second in this particular race because I have a feeling this could be one where Showcase maybe draws off quite a bit at the end, and somebody at a price can run up into second as some horses may be getting geared down, etc. So will be interesting to see. Well, let's move to the second race on the card, which is the Grade 2 Dwyer for 3-year-olds going a mile on the dirt. And let's all reminisce about the time that Charge It won this race by 23.5 lengths, and we all thought he was a super horse. Listen, this is a 4-horse field, which is why you're not going to see a value play. God bless Sara for trying to find value in this particular race. I really wanted to try to beat Domestic Product in this spot, and I just had a hard time getting there. I agree he's probably not the strongest 6-5 favorite, but I just wasn't really able to mount a huge case against him. That Pegasus was just a bizarre race last time out, being stacked 4 wide really the entire way around. And listen, Hades, who finished third in that race, really faded off quite a bit late as well. I mean, certainly Tuscan Sky drew away to win by 6, but Domestic Product's a horse that has turned in a lot of solid efforts. He crossed the line through the Kentucky Derby, as a lot of us tend to do, because that race can be a little fluky and a little longer than most horses want. We're cutting back to a 1-turn mile here. This is a horse that traditionally likes to come from off the pace. We'll see if he gets much pace in a short field, but I just felt he was really tough to get around. But you found a way with number 4, Save the Trees.
Well, we'll see if I did find a way or not when next on this race. And I'm sure Charge It also dreams about his Dwyer romp and how he's going to get back to that because there's streaks of brilliance that we have not seen since. But Save the Trees has a lot that he needs to prove in comparison to what we've already seen from some of the other runners in this race. That's why you're going to get somewhat of a price. He's obviously going to play much bigger in your multi-race bets than he is just to win in this race with only 4 horses in this field. He has to get the distance. He has to get out of the gate a little bit quicker, and he does have to get faster. But we didn't see horses make the kind of move that he did breaking his maiden at Keeneland pretty much at all through the spring meet in terms of horses that were off so slowly, closing from last. And the pace in that race did hold together pretty well. We did see the second place finisher rather come back to win, as well as the third place finisher in that race. So you know that he's at least coming out of a productive race. And then he was able to replicate it, going over to Churchill Downs, a similar type of trip. He didn't get out of the gate all that quickly, but he was able to close from last and be able to make up that kind of ground at yet another track where we don't see that happen quite as frequently as we do some other places that have those fair surfaces or those surfaces that aren't quite as kind to speed as other ones are. So I just didn't really want to take Domestic Product at a super short price. I have a theory that Bilal needs Lasix for some of his better numbers. And if that is true, and it may not be, then he's faster than really anyone else in this field. And Hades, yes, that last race has some excuses where everybody except for Tuscan Sky really wanted to be a part of that early pace. And I think the rail ended up getting good towards the end of that day. And so maybe some other excuses for horses that were caught a little bit wider. But how good is Hades really? I don't know. And it doesn't necessarily seem as though he's going to get this loose on the lead type of trip that some might think that he's going to get, because I don't really see Bilal as a horse that's that slow. So ultimately, I just said, okay, I don't like three of these horses. I can make a case for the fourth. Why not?
I hear you on that. I think that's a wise way to go, and certainly zigging when others zag. Yeah, and Bilal's one, that was where I wanted to go initially with my selection, but I agree with you about the Lasix. I also think a mile might just be a bridge too far for him. And yeah, I agree though. Hades is not going to get loose on the lead at all because Bilal is going to send from that inside rail. So yeah, we'll see who ends up getting the win here. I have a feeling domestic product. If you get 6-5, honestly, that would be a gift, I think, because I have a feeling this horse will get bet down below even money simply based off name recognition and connections. So we'll have to wait and see. But let's head over to race number 3, which is a $62,000 optional claimer for 3-year-olds and older, going 6 furlongs. And this is our first turf race. And you went with a horse that we talk about a lot and a horse that sometimes has a propensity for finishing second. But talking to me a little bit about Run Curtis Run.
Yeah, that's kind of the theme with both horses that I gravitated towards in this race. They don't necessarily get themselves in the winner's circle all that often, at least Run Curtis Run a little bit more so than our value play in Fauci. But I feel like he has had some really tough trips in some of his races where he's had to come from off the pace or alter his running style, and really shown a lot of different dimensions to be that consistent type that while he doesn't always get his picture taken, you can usually count on him to run his race, sometimes even on the dirt as well. And I think that this is an easier field overall than he's been facing in some of his races as of late. It's a shorter field as well, so less to do in terms of navigating traffic if he is one that's going to be coming from slightly off the pace in this race. But he is that tactical type. They can decide where they want to be with him depending on how things do shake out in here. And he's just been able to keep his form over a significantly longer period of time than many horses are able to do so, from 2 up until now as a 5-year-old. I mean, he's just been the model of consistency. So do I love 7-5 on a horse that usually rounds out those exotics at a bit of a price? No. But overall, when you look at who he's faced in comparison to some of the others in this field and run well against, I trust him a little bit more to at least run his race.
Yeah, no arguments there. He's a very logical top pick, I think, in this race. And important to note that there are a number of main track only horses in this race in case it gets washed off. We're expecting maybe some showers on Saturday, but that's even maybe a little generous, a very small percentage chance at this point. So we'll see. But if it remains on the turf, it's really only about a 6-horse field. I ultimately went to the number 2 Script for Graham Motion. You know, this is an interesting horse, and it's interesting to see that Graham has really stuck with this decision to keep the horse sprinting, because this is one who was more of a turf router and had some success, you know, ran some pretty nice races and ran against some decent company going long on the turf in some big time races in terms of high level allowance and the optional claiming races. Even went back, ran in the Hollywood Derby a couple of years ago as a 3-year-old, but, you know, shortened up to start the year on the Tapeta at Gulfstream Park, and then followed it up with another race that was short at Saratoga, actually, for that Belmont Stakes Racing Festival weekend, finishing behind Run Curtis Run. I'm just curious. This horse was on the rail for that race. I never liked that in sprints. Now we get a little, and granted, we're still in the number 2 hole, but get off that a little bit in terms of the rail. And I'm always curious about how these horses that are coming from off the pace, how a smaller field might be advantageous. That they're going to be grouped a little bit more closely together. There's not going to be as much traffic, perhaps, for them to deal with. You mentioned this with regards to Run Curtis Run. You know, just having to sometimes navigate issues with traffic, may not have to worry about that sort of thing. I think you could say the same potentially for a horse like Script. We ultimately went to the same value play in this particular race, and that is the number 4 Fauci for Philip Antonucci. Flavian Pratt won 5 races for the second straight 4th of July up here in New York. So he's on a roll, and he's riding Fauci in this race. What attracted you to this one at 9-2 in the morning line?
Revenge. This is a horse that, if we go all the way back to before I ever had a Twitter account, I went to Saratoga during the summer, and I really liked how he was presenting himself in the paddock when he finished second by a nose to Arrest Me Red. And I've been chasing him ever since, and he really hasn't done much since, but continue to hit the board at big prices. And it's not like you're going to get a very big price on him in this spot, but he's just one of those other horses that you can count on to be a part of those exotics that usually runs their race. He tends to show up. He usually makes that late closing kick that's never quite enough, but he's one that you can put into your bets, feeling more confident that he's going to at least be around at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just add one more thing, which is he's coming off a layoff. But if you look in the past, he's run relatively well off the bench, off those 6-7 month efforts, running second and third before. So expect an honest effort from him. It's not like this is a horse that needs a couple of races usually. He can respond pretty well off the layoff. So something to keep in mind there for race number 3. Well, let's head to race number 4. Now, this feels a little bit more like Aqueduct. $50,000 claimer for 3-year-old fillies, and we're going 6.5 furlongs on the dirt. And my top pick is your value play, and that's the number 3 Grammy Girl at 9-2 for Horatio DePaz. This is just an outfit that I tend to trust a lot. I like the DePaz barn quite a bit. I feel like he's a horseman that gets his horses ready consistently. They typically turn in extremely solid efforts. I like the fact this horse is cutting back a little bit as well and should be part of the early pace scenario. And this is one who just, if you look at the running lines, has faded late the last couple of times out, going a mile or a mile and a 16th. Horatio tried him on the turf last time out, and that obviously was not the way to go. But this is one that was at least thought well enough of to attempt a stakes race back at Laurel Park as three races back. And I just think this is one who, on the class drop a little bit, cutting back in distance, 9-2 in the morning line, I thought was a little bit interesting with Manny Franco aboard. Ultimately, though, you went with Play Good, Pay Good as your top pick. So talk a little bit about that one.
I mean, this horse has just been facing better horses overall and now takes that drop in class since making that trainer switch a couple starts ago. And this is around the level where she was able to break her maiden. She's run okay in some tougher spots. And overall, I didn't love that she was disappointing at a short price in her last start, but I think that there were at least some excuses in that race at Laurel where she didn't get out of the gate quite as quickly as she usually does. She was facing some horses that have come back to run okay in that race 2 back here in New York, as well as the race before that when she was able to get the win. So I think that just overall, based on company kept, I was looking for somebody that was making a reasonable drop in class in terms of who they were going to be facing in here versus who they had been facing in the past, and at least had shown that they could be competitive at a somewhat higher level. So I just really didn't make much of a case for others in this spot. I thought Grammy Girl a little bit interesting, just like you mentioned, the new face coming in for an outfit that I respect. I like the cutback in distance as well. But overall, unless you're going towards the outside with low society, or you've had the opportunity to make a case for progeny, I just didn't really see a ton of substance overall to this race. And usually when I can't make a big case for somebody else, I end up having to say, okay, it might just be as simple as a favorite.
Yeah, and we should mention the number 5 Low Society and the number 6 5-2. Those are 2 horses that just ran last week for Linda Rice, and I don't want to try to become a tea reader and try to figure out kind of what's going to happen with scratches, but I just think there's a chance that those 2 horses may get scratched on the day, and so I was a little skittish on picking either of them as my top pick, knowing that they may or may not run, or at least that one of that pair may not end up running in this particular race. So that's why I didn't really look towards them in terms of a value play or anything like that. Yeah, I looked at Progeny at 8-1 as a horse that I thought might be a little bit interesting and present a little bit of value. George Weaver's barn obviously has been, doing well over the last year or so up here in New York. He had a very kind of big breakout year last year at Saratoga with a lot of his 2-year-olds running quite well on the turf. And, while he has had a lot of success on the grass, he's also had some legitimate success in dirt races as well. This is another one taking a similar class drop. And to your point, this is a horse that, one broke its maiden at a kind of a similar level, a maiden claiming 40, and also got the job done in an optional claiming 50, going a mile. This one has won at a mile, going at 6 furlongs, has a little bit of versatility, can rate a little bit. And I just thought at 8-1, what could end up being a rather short field might present a little bit of value. But let's head to race number 5, which is a $32,000 claimer for 4-year-olds and up. This is going 7 furlongs on the dirt. And this one felt really tough to get around the old Linda Rice, bringing them up from Kentucky angle. And so Knee Deep in Snow, the number 5 horse at 5-2, was both of our top pick. But I will let you go first talking about this one.
I mean, I'm just so glad that Gentleman Joe is in this race with Ira Ortiz Jr. aboard so that you might get second choice on a horse who has faced the best horses overall. When you look back on the page for anybody in this field, I mean, he's run against a different galaxy level of horses in comparison to who some of these others have faced in this field, and run well against some of them. Grade 1 placed, running behind Jackie's Warrior. He's faced horses like Cody's Wish, like Zozo's, who I don't love, and I know you don't love either, but the price that he would be in this field in comparison is so much shorter. And now, yes, he's coming in first off the claim for Linda Rice, and he was a very short price when dropping in for that price tag last time out at Keeneland for the $40,000 tag, but the horse that he finished second to came back to win his next start against Tougher. He improved to a 96 buyer, and then he ran second in his most recent start at Delaware, returning to an 84, so still around that middle 80s type of range. So facing a horse that was in solid form, that was capable of running some faster races. So I don't think that that's that much of a disgrace against him. And when you look at who everyone else has faced in this field, it's just not a comparison to what Knee Deep in Snow has been running against and throughout his entire career and even last time out.
Yeah, no, totally agreed. And, I think those of us who follow the New York circuit well have seen, Linda claim some of these horses out of Kentucky, bring them up to New York. And quite frankly, they just end up running much better against New York level competition. And, and this was a horse that already, to your point, has been running against a galaxy different level competition. So I was hard pressed to make a case against this horse in any way, shape, or form. And agreed with you, the Gentleman Joe for Rick Dutrow Jr. might end up allowing Knee Deep in Snow to at least remain a modest price. Even if he goes off as a favorite, still might not be the sort of short price that I think he probably should be in this particular race. My value play was a Munson, and I was so ashamed I didn't even put down the morning line price apparently on him in the graphic, but he is 9-2 on the morning line. And this is one for the Cantor Marcy barn that the reason I kind of went with this horse, stepping up maybe a little bit in class, have been running against these kind of claiming 25s, but stacked up a couple of wins in a row. You always like to see that. I like to see horses build confidence and learn how to win. So that's great to see. I mean, this is a veteran horse, 37 career races, 13 wins. So knows how to get his picture taken, even if it's at a lower level. And I also like that Flavian Pratt sticks aboard for this horse. So I thought at 9-2, maybe not the biggest value play in the world, but might be just as simple as making a straight exacta in this particular race with the 5 and the 6. So that was my thought. You went to digital as your value play. What did you see in this one?
Not much, honestly. I think that this is one of those horses that I respect that they've run well. And by well, I mean finishing second at different levels for a lot of different outfits as of late. Been able to keep that sort of consistent form that we've really seen a horse like Amundsen refined as of late, even if it has been against lesser company, a horse that has been able to pair up races consecutively that show that they at least can show up and hit the board and do something in some of their races. And I like that with digital, he's gone to so many different barns. He's been so popular in the claim box. So somebody out there is seeing something where they want to have this horse in their barn at whatever level that might be. And this might be too tough of a level for him overall. But looking around at the rest of this field outside of Knee Deep in Snow, it's not as though anybody is all that much of a superstar in here where they really tower over anybody else in this field. And I think that overall, just seeing him run his race, regardless of the level of competition that he's been in or which barn he's been in, I do respect that. So he's one I would use in my exotics under Knee Deep in Snow.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you about your assessment of the rest of the field in comparison to each other in that regard. Now let's head to the Belmont Derby and let's all say it together. Johnny V on the lead. And that is Tricari at 7-2 for my top pick. Also Sarah's top pick in this particular race. Sara knows it well. I have my theory, and I think you are a pretty strong believer in this as well, that when John Velasquez gets to the front, good luck trying to catch him. And whether that's on the dirt or the turf, I think he is just a dangerous jockey up on the lead. Tricari is a horse that upset the field at 47-1 in that American turf, 2 back at Churchill Downs on the Kentucky Day undercard. But this is one that has really good form, and outside of a debut has never missed the board and ran, I thought, a really good race at the Penn Mile, actually. And those were some pretty strong fractions. The horses that finished in front of him that day, First World War and Aspenite, both came from much further back off the pace. And this is a horse that really dug in, tried to hold on, finished third by a neck as the favorite. But I thought a completely respectable effort there from Tricari. Love the Oscar performance influence. And like I said, now we get Velasquez up on the board for Graham Motion. And those are just 2 connections that I tend to trust a lot in this spot. And I have a feeling he might just get out up front and be able to set his own fractions. And if you look, the 2 times he's really lost since, that debut effort were really strong fractions to the quarter and half. When he's been able to set or stalk a much more reasonable pace, he's tended to do very well. And that's exactly the sort of setup I think he'll get there. I just didn't have a lot of confidence in the favorites in this one. So, Sara, I don't know if you saw this a little bit differently in terms of your reasoning behind Tricari, but obviously your top pick as well.
We agree that John Velasquez is a rider that I feel is so respected on the lead that sometimes he's not necessarily challenged, or that he's in a way sort of allowed to get away with some softer fractions. But I think that that's something that you could also say about a lot of riders in the jockey colony. And it's not really about who's on the front. It's about who's behind, not making aggressive decisions or making those passive choices to just let others go. And when you have a short field like this, where we did see in the Pennine Ridge, White Palomino able to get away with a very moderate pace and still not hold on to win over Legend of Time, who did have some trouble in that race and did close into a slow pace in there. How hot is this pace really going to be, even if he doesn't make the lead? And it is White Palomino setting those early fractions. And just as you mentioned, he's been able to still sort of stick around when he's been through some more punishing fractions than he's likely to have to deal with in this Belmont Derby. And so if he got things to go a little bit slower early on and was still in good position, I think that he has the ability to finish up pretty nicely in here and has a little bit more talent, at least what we've seen so far, than a horse like White Palomino. And even with that race last time out in the Penn Mile, you mentioned the company that he kept returning to run well, and coming from the back of the pack, but he also had a very wide journey in that race. And when he won at Churchill Downs, he was able to win from a more inside post. And with the short field, I don't necessarily see him getting caught 10 wide going into the first turn or from post 10 like he was in that Penn Mile. So I wanted to go with him. I think that Endlessly is a decent horse. I don't think it's necessarily proven yet that turf is his best surface. I think that I would like to see that before I take him at an extremely short price in a field where I don't really think he's going to be on the front end. Legend of Time is fine, but he beat up on an okay group of horses, and he really disappointed when he was in at that American Derby. Or the American turf at Churchill Downs when Tricari was able to upset that field. So how good is he really? I don't know. And if he continues to have those same gait issues like he did in that last race, things are not always going to work out like they did in there, where horses are not really going to be sustained the soft fractions that they're able to set early on. And the competition, I think, is getting ever so slightly more difficult for him. And then as far as my value play, if I want a horse that's going to be coming from off the pace, I'd rather take one with a little bit more upside who's going to be a massive price in comparison to Legend of Time. A horse that ran okay in that Pennine Ridge, does need to take another step forward, does need to get a bit faster. But if I'm looking for a horse that's going to be coming from further back, I'd rather take one that's 6-1 than one that I really don't trust at 5-2.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Completely agree with that logic. And what I would say about Legend of Time is that's a horse I would very much so pay attention to in the paddock. If you remember that American turf, he looked washed out walking into I mean, he was all lathered up. I remember just seeing him coming for home, and it just looked like he was completely lathered from basically the halter down. And so it was just, Charlie Appleby horses can tend to be a little high strung they can be a little high maintenance. They can get a little irritated and worked up in the paddock. So that's one I would absolutely be paying attention to see kind of what does he look like with the weather and the warm temperatures. And those are things to keep an eye on with Legend of Time. And I agree. I mean, even that 84 Beyer speed figure that came back from the Pine Ridge was, average and certainly nothing that towers over anybody else. And, I've written about this before, but from 2019 to 2023, Charlie Appleby won at a 42% rate in North America. Since the start of 2023, he's won at a 25% rate. He's beatable. Now, I've made this point before. Many trainers would kill to win at 25% in graded stakes competition all the time. Certainly. But the point that I'd make is he's much more like Chad Brown and Phil D'Amato now, rather than just being this whole other galaxy of trainer where you just see a Charlie Appleby horse, especially with William Buick aboard, and you just automatically single that type of a horse. I don't think Legend of Time is that level of talent. As for White Palomino, it definitely got away with the kind of soft fractions up front last time. I just wonder if that's what he wants to do, or if he's more comfortable tracking maybe. And maybe he just wants to run a little bit of the target. I don't want to say he got lost in the lead, but maybe that just was not the race shape for him. And so at 5-1, again, you're not going to get many Chad Brown, Flavian Pratt horses that are 5-1 in a relatively short field in a stakes race. So I just thought at 5-1, even if you like this horse underneath, that's one I thought could maybe outperform relative to the rest of the field, because like you, Endlessly feels like a horse that may be best on synthetic actually. And then, again, I don't know how he's going to bounce back from that Kentucky Derby. That's always an X factor that you just don't know until you see horses do it. So let's move on to race number 7 on the card, which is a $40,000 claimer for 3-year-olds going 7 furlongs on the dirt. And we both are trying to get by the favorite in this race. We're doing it in some different ways. You went after a couple of big prices, both in your top pick and your value play. So start with the number 1, Big Night Out.
Well, I was looking at the trainer of this horse, Oscar Barrera III, and then I was looking at the jockey listed to ride, IRAD Ortiz Jr., and I thought to myself, how often does IRAD Ortiz Jr. actually ride for Oscar Barrera? And the answer is not that often. He's 1 for 8 over the past 5 years with him, but 4 for 8 in the money. So finishing on the board 50% of the time and we know how often IRAD will ride every level of race to his maximum capability, travel all over to wherever the days are that are going to be those horses that he can get on. He'll ride the full card. He'll usually ride most of the time without taking those gaps in between his schedule. So to only have ridden for this trainer 8 times over the past 5 years and to have 4 of those finish in the money, I thought that this was a horse that was worth looking at, because these are just not connections that you see team up all of that often. And this is a horse that's also getting a little bit of class relief, switching back to the dirt, a surface that he was a winner on, and one that's just relatively lightly raced in comparison to a lot of these more exposed types throughout the rest of this field, because you have a lot of horses that have had several opportunities in for a tag or just overall in their careers. And with him, I think that he's just a little bit underexposed. Yes, he won that off the turf race when he was breaking his maiden, but that was his only race so far in for a tag. He was facing some tougher company in those 3 maiden special weight races. The turf experiment didn't work out. Now he's getting that class relief from returning to a more realistic level. And I think that with IRAD Ortiz Jr. aboard, you're going to at least get your money's worth of a ride.
Yeah, no, I hear you on all of that. And I think, we should just at least mention both of us are trying to beat the number 4 Vespucci, who's the even money favorite for trainer Patrick Reynolds. And this is one who, listen, 3 back, if you had him, I'd feel bad. That was a tough beat when he finished second by a nose at 11-1. But this horse has taken steps back the last 2 times out. And it's hard for me to make a case, a horse coming off, pretty distant 3rd place finish and a $16,000 optional claimer at Monmouth, and now getting dropped in for the tag, which I don't really love that move. So I ultimately went to the number 8, Safalo's Mission, 6-1 for Linda Rice. Listen, this is a horse that, we made a point about this type of runner earlier. 1 for 19, does not necessarily like to win a lot, finishes underneath a whole lot, though, is 12 for 19 in the money. But he's taken the big class drop, is going from state bred allowance company to the claiming levels. And when Linda does this, she wins at about a 27% clip over the last 5 years. So she's a trainer that when she makes that drop, it's rarely a spur of the moment decision. It's also rarely, she knows how to place these horses in claiming races as well. So, and the right sort of level to place them in. So I just thought this with Jose Lezcano, who's the number one jockey up on the mount at 6-1, thought just, has been facing tougher company. You go back, several starts, you might have to go back, but you look at a horse like Drake's Passage, who's running in Friday's Brooklyn Stakes, and some other names with a bunch of italics there. You see a lot of next out winners that this horse has faced over the last couple of years. So it's just something notable. I thought 6-1 was a little bit interesting. And then to finish underneath, listen, if you're looking to round out an exacta, I don't know if there's a better horse to play than Refua at 8-1. This is a horse that absolutely loves finishing second, 25 career races, 1 victory, 13 second place finishes. So, man, include this horse in your exacta at 8-1, because this is what this horse likes to do, quite frankly. Reminds me a little bit of a horse that we used to see before they graduated to the winning level, but that was risk-free, was a little like this, and just always finished second. So I thought at 8-1, I don't see as a win threat, but as a horse that could run underneath at a little bit of a price. Now, you went to Cam Duke. This is a horse I have been chasing, I feel like, for a year. And so my heart is with you on this, but talk to me about this horse a little.
I feel like he's become a popular pet for many of us at NYRA in terms of one that we try to get at the right time, at the right price. And many have failed to do so, myself included. But his races 2 and 3 back have actually been pretty solid, where he was able to finish second and run some of his faster races overall in his career. I don't know what happened last time. I don't have a big excuse for that race where he was ultimately eased after being bumped. But I like that he comes right back in here. And if he can sort of replicate those last races 2 and 3 back and get back to some of that early speed that he's shown when he can be more effective, I think that he could have an opportunity in here when he is dropping now in class from actually running a really good effort 2 races ago at a tougher level. So is he a kind of that fair weather horse that we don't really know what we're going to get from him, and he can be more inconsistent? Yes, absolutely. But these are the types of horses that I like to go after when they are those fairer prices and when they're likely to show some speed, which I think both things will be true in this spot.
Yeah. Well, like I said, my heart's with you on this one. So, I might have to put in a little bet, just because if I don't, he's guaranteed to win.
Of course.
So,
That's how that works.
I might be the jinx, we'll see. But listen, let's move on to race number 8, which is the John A. Nayrud grade 2 for 4-year-old and olders, going 7 furlongs on the dirt. And this is one where, listen, I think Ever So Mischievous, your top pick, makes a lot of sense in this race. I ultimately went to the number 3 Prevalence, Brendan Walsh, Irad Ortiz Jr. These are winning combinations. These are two who, when they team up, they tend to win, and they tend to have a nice return on investment too. So I like to see those two working together in this spot. This is it's an interesting horse in that this was a horse that won the Commonwealth Stakes back in 2022. And I feel like then just completely lost his form for a while. And I feel like Brendan didn't really know what to do with this horse, tried him on the turf, tried him on the synthetic at different times. And then it was just kind of like this horse eventually at the age of 6 kind of rediscovered his form a little bit. And all of a sudden, those last 3 dirt efforts have all been 90-plus buyer speed figures. 1 win against $100,000 allowance optional claiming company, in which he beat a horse like Surveillance, and finished second to Super Chow last time out in the Maryland Sprint, which finishing second to Super Chow at 6 furlongs in the slop is no disrespect there. And you look at that other race, going back last year, the Maryland Sprint grade 3, lost to Straight No Chaser on a day where that horse just caught a flyer and nobody was going to beat that horse that day. So I just thought at 5-2, this horse maybe has rediscovered that form. That's weird to say at 6 years old, but obviously Ever So Mischievous, second back from a little bit of a layoff for Brad Cox, makes a lot of sense too.
I just like that he was a perfect record at the 7 furlong distance, a horse that has that 3 for 3 going this, but can handle slightly different distances as well. And I liked that comeback effort from him. I think that was obviously not the goal going forwards for the rest of this year, for the rest of his 4 and up campaign for him. But I like that he was at least able to get that victory off the bench at a short price, do what he was supposed to do in that spot to get that win. And now I think that they're targeting some more realistic spots for him where he has that talent and that capability to be one of those grade 3, grade 2, maybe even this year grade 1, who knows, types of horses, because he has races that have excuses when he hasn't run that well. If you go back to that Cigar Mile, that was a track that really favored that inside speed, as we've seen play out time and time again with horses returning out of those races and really proving that type of track bias that we had that day. And while you know just as well as anyone that I have immense love for Hoist the Gold, that was the perfect kind of setup for him in there. And Ever So Mischievous just did not get the right kind of trip in that race with the way the track was playing to be effective. And other than that, he hasn't really run a bad race through the entirety of his career so far. So I think that he's just a logical type that makes sense in here as one that won't be too far away from the pace and just has that consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. Rock solid, consistent horse. And well, listen, that Cigar Mile obviously then produced your Saudi Cup winner, Senior Buscador. So everybody knows if you want to get ready for the richest race in the world, come to Aqueduct, run at the Cigar Mile because that's the proper prep. Listen, we talked a lot about horses that like to make a really try hard effort and finish underneath, and perhaps no horse is more exemplary of that than 90% Maddie, who I just feel like tries hard every single time. Reminds me a little bit actually of a horse we just saw run last week, Tumbarumba. Just always tries hard, runs really honest, runs really consistent numbers, and just, is always second best, as, he's been the last 4 times out, but has run against some good horses. And then last time out, just ran against a buzzsaw named Baby Yoda. Shout out to my dad. Baby Yoda's #1 fan. But that was a day where nobody was catching Baby Yoda at Saratoga. So 90% Maddie at 6-1, I do feel like is a little bit of a nice play in this race.
I do as well. I think that's a horse that I definitely want to be making that key in my exacta for second place, and
Yeah.
maybe just a little bit of a saver on top. Because with him, I think it was this question of whether or not he really had become this faster horse as he got older. And he's been able to significantly back that up multiple times going forwards over his couple of starts this year. The first one at Parks, then running in that Run Happy and finishing a strong closing effort in there to Joey Freshwater. And then, just as you mentioned, in the True North, I think a lot of people that were playing and paying attention to Belmont at Saratoga over that weekend saw that speed did very well throughout. And while it may have been more of that situation where it was the kickback that was really bothering some horses from making their late closing runs, I think that he was one that was able to get out wide and make that sort of closing move and not have to deal with some of that dirt coming back in his face in the same way that was really having a significant impact on many of the other horses that were those that were coming from further back. And so I think he was one that also showed that you could make up ground throughout that weekend that we had if you got the right kind of setup, if you got yourself out into the clear. And just as you mentioned, Baby Yoda is one of those horses that really is that horse for course at Saratoga, and is in decent form right now because he had that win prior to that. So is the day now going to be this one for 90% Maddie to break through and get the victory? I don't know. I still think this horse needs to take another little bit of a step forward in terms of what this one has proven from a class standpoint overall against some of these older veterans. But this is a horse that's definitely in good form right now and that you can trust to show up and be running late.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to race number 9, the Belmont Oaks Grade 1 for 3-year-old fillies. And this is going a mile and 3/16 on the turf. And listen, this was an interesting race. We went in a lot of different directions here. You ultimately went to #7. She Feels Pretty as your top selection. What drew you to this particular horse?
I mean, I don't think I was more impressed by anyone Preakness weekend than her
Mm,
performance in that hilltop. And it was just the ease with which she was able to win that race. And no, she wasn't beating up on the toughest horses in the world. She's going to have to face some stiffer competition in here with some of that European contingent coming in who does have that proven capability on courses with a little bit of moisture in it. But I think that she at least proved that, yes, was that turf good? I don't know. It could have been a little bit more on the wetter side overall as far as what we saw Preakness weekend in terms of the amount of rainfall that they had. And I like that she was at least proving that she was proficient over it and able to really be that push button type of horse coming back and making that 3-year-old debut. When she was asked to go, the ears went up, she started making a move. It was a quick acceleration, and that's what I like to see from a horse being so responsive to their rider. And she drew away impressively, and anyone that watches that race could tell that she completely dominated that field. And I think that building on that 2-year-old form that she had shown that she already has a little bit of capability, coming back with a statement like that with just a lot of ease. Now, second off the layoff, this is going to be a tougher task, but I like that she's really done nothing wrong overall so far in her lightly raced career. And I think that she's a horse that could be pretty special overall for this barn.
Yeah, no arguments here. And Cherie DeVaux's barn has been firing on all cylinders, and we've seen her have so much success, not just up here in New York, but down in Kentucky, and to your point in Pimlico on Preakness undercard. So she's a barn that really travels well and places her horses well. And I think most of us who are fans of the game are fans of Cherie's just because she does things the right way, and that's a barn that just really takes care of their horses and puts them in spots to succeed. And I think we both think Johnny Velasquez could have a very big day on Saturday as a result of this. Not just this particular race, but a lot of others where we've been mentioning his name, and he's aboard She Feels Pretty. Listen, this is one where I went to an Appleby horse with William Buick aboard. I think it's notable that Buick is coming over for this weekend. I mean, Appleby really just has two horses, Legend of Time and the number 8, Cinderella's Dream. I'm not sure if there's a preference between one or the other, but I just think Cinderella's Dream's kind of an interesting horse. This is one who ran behind Porta Fortuna, who came back to win the Coronation Stakes during Royal Ascot. Of course, now you could make the same thing with She Feels Pretty, who finished right behind Porta Fortuna in that Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf for the fillies back at Santa Anita last year. But that 1,000 guineas that Cinderella's Dream is coming out of was a very strong race. Even the third place horse in that race came back to run third in the Coronation Cup. So you saw a lot of horses coming out of there. Prior to that effort, the horse had never lost, and Buick had been aboard on 3 of those victories. Now gets back aboard, gets a little bit more of a weight allowance as well, as carrying 121 pounds, which is quite a drop from some of her previous races. 9-2. Again, you don't get many Appleby horses 9-2 with William Buick aboard. So that was where I went as my top pick. And my value play, I went to on the inside rail, number 1, Pin Up Betty. This is one, Mike Maker going long in the turf. Sure, I'll take a shot with that. And that's a barn that tends to do well with these types of things. The types of horses that I like, which are young horses with ascending speed figures. And that's exactly what you have with a horse trying the turf. And once it made that switch over to the grass, you've seen this horse get better and better and better. And so broke its maiden and then immediately comes back to win the grade 3 Regret last time out over Buku, who's in this race. And, that I thought was a very notable effort to come back right away and, follow up a maiden victory with a relatively easy win at a grade 3 level race. So obviously it has to step up again, but a 10-1 stretching out a little bit more. I like this one quite a bit in that spot. So that was where I went for my value play. You went to a horse that I actually really liked last time out, Cy B at 15-1.
That stumble was significant at the start in that
Yep.
Wonder Again, and I don't think that field, in comparison to this field, was all that star-studded in general. But I thought that with the trouble this one had early on in that race, really bobbling forward in there, and then still able to run a very valid race and finishing second at a bit of a price that day after going off as the favorite in her 2 prior starts. She just seems like that lightly race type that has taken that step forward, that is improving overall, and has really moved up on the turf in general. And so if this Cherie DeVaux Exacta comes in, I at least know that she will be with the one that is that a bit more of a price. And I think that this one, I love the English channels anytime that we get a little bit of weather on the turf. So I really tend to rely on that sort of pedigree to do really well and sort of take that big jump up in their form overall when we do have a little bit of moisture in the turf course, if that ends up being the case on Saturday.
Absolutely. We should just mention from that Wonder Again, then the winner of that, number 6, Sagesta, is also in this race at 6-1 for Chad Brown, Irad Ortiz Jr. That horse kind of had the perfect setup last time. Might not be able to replicate that this time, but certainly honest price for a Brown and Irad Ortiz Jr. horse at 6-1 if you like that one in this race. Well, let's go to race number 10 on the card, and that is a $100,000 allowance race for 3-year-old and olders going a mile on the turf. And this was a race that I alluded to earlier that we were, before we started recording, where I said I really tried to disagree with you on this race, and I really could not find an alternative. And this was it for Capture the Flag, 9-2 in the morning line for Todd Pletcher. This horse just seems to check a lot of boxes. Second back from the layoff. Really wide trip last time. Tired late, which is exactly what you would expect after a horse hadn't run in 8 or 9 months. And this one just feels, again, Johnny Velasquez aboard. Like I said last time, feels like we're expecting a big day from Johnny V. And I think 9-2 is a very generous price if you're able to get it. Like the fact that Pletcher's gotten this one to a workout since then, and is now stretching out a little bit from that 5.5 furlong start first off the bench, which is not really what this horse wants to do. This horse wants to go longer. So I think that's where I landed on that one. Obviously, you did as well.
Right. And this is a horse that I had a little bit of interest in last time and clearly just does not want to be a turf sprinter. But I do like now, second off the layoff, getting that extra distance that this one had run okay at in the past, as you mentioned. And I think that looking at the prior company that this horse had kept when routing on the turf and running some of those higher numbers for him overall before going to the sidelines, you look at horses like I'm Very Busy. You look at horses like Redistricting, like Quality G, horses that we saw them go on to have pretty solid seasons overall following those races. And I think that just on company kept, now getting back to something that he might be more proficient at, having a little bit more fitness second off of that layoff, just makes a lot of sense coming into this spot where a lot of horses you can make sort of the case for looking a little bit similar on paper. And at least this one, as we've talked about being one of our favorite angles, he has that upside. He's still lightly raced. He's underexposed. And you know that he at least kept some good company in the past when he was more at what we've seen as his peak so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we should mention the number 4, Alexis Zorba, is your morning line favorite. I don't think this horse wants a mile. I know that's the distance the horse broke its maiden at, but that was a kind of a fluky race down at Gulfstream Park, got incredibly loose on the lead that day. And the number 2, Torigo, 5-2 for Danny Gargan, is your second choice. That horse had every reason to run past the company last time out, just didn't do it. So, I'm at a short price. I'm a little wary in that spot, which is why I think we both gravitated towards horses with a little bit more of a value play there. Speaking of value play, my number 8 is 10-1, and that is Mission North. This is another horse that fits the description. If you toss out the one dirt effort, what has this horse done every single race? Gotten faster and faster and faster. Granted, last out maiden winner is going to need to step up against tougher company for sure. That goes without saying, but this horse has some useful speed, is tactical, I think, and, has shown the ability to at times pass horses, then sometimes fade a little bit late depending on the distance and the race setup. But again, needs to improve a little bit, has that Galileo pedigree a couple of generations back. So there's some serious turf routing pedigree there, and willing, again, at 10-1, willing to use this horse as more of an underneath option in this race. Like I said, admittedly, going against tougher company, you went to an even bigger price with Ghostly Prince. What drew you to this one?
This one can show up and run a solid race every once in a while. We saw this horse do well at Saratoga last summer. It might be one that just gets into that good form around this time of year. And if you look at that race that a couple of them are coming out of, when you look at Torigo or Alexis Zorba at very short prices, as they were both under 10-1 in that last start. Well, Ghostly Prince was 43-1, and he finished fourth right behind Torigo and did finish ahead of Alexis Zorba. So just sort of based on that effort, I didn't necessarily see that he had so much of an easier trip than either of them. I think he's just more of that horse that is a little bit more proven to show up at this distance than some of the other ones that are going to be those shorter prices. And he just seems to run his race on a pretty regular basis, especially here on the New York circuit. And looking back at the company that he's kept over the winter, I mean, just better horses overall than he's going to be facing in here. Some tough New York breds, as well as some tougher company overall. And I think that he's one that he pops up with those good efforts from time to time, and hoping that maybe this is one of those times.
Absolutely. And let's head to the bailout race number 11, $90,000 maiden special weight for 3-year-olds and older, going 6 furlongs on the turf. Both of us are trying to get past the coupled even odds entry trained by Chad Brown. And listen, that's never an easy thing to do. I get it. I thought I was going with some price plays as my top pick. You really went with a price play. You always outdo me with these sorts of things. So talk to me a little bit about number 8, Prospero, who you like up top.
It only counts if they win.
It does. It does. That is true. But they only need to win once or twice. That's the key.
Precisely. Less percentage, more of a profit. But look, as we talked about, hoping that John Velasquez has a pretty hot day on Saturday. Sharita as well, as they team up yet again in this nightcap. And often we see riders that have that success earlier on in the card end up coming back and winning the last race or the second to last race or whatever the case may be going forwards. As we also saw on Thursday, the day of this recording, with momentum in general, Flavien Prat getting that 5-win day and riding very well in the last race as well to finish second at a big price. And once you have that forward momentum going, it's harder to make that stop and to really discontinue that going forwards. And if he's already having a good day by this time, I still want to be a part of that at a price of the horse that the angles we talked about, the upside off the layoff, coming back now as a 3-year-old. If this horse can improve off of that first race as a 2-year-old, where I actually thought he didn't run all that badly overall, and we've seen that be a pretty productive race going forwards. The winner of that race, Apollo 10, as a winner since then. Irish Gent won since then. Feltrinelli just won the other day since then. So at least he's been keeping some good company in that one debut effort, and has had all this time to mature since then. A lot of changes with this horse, now switching barns and coming back as that 3-year-old off of that layoff. And I just wasn't really in love with anyone we had seen so far. Didn't want to take a super short price on the Chad Brown entry, and thought that this one could be more of that interesting type towards the outside, as one that at least has run against some okay horses overall in comparison to the unknowns of the rest of this field. And then we both have the same value play in here as a horse that, I mean, I don't know where that effort 2 starts ago came from to finish second, but at least we saw that horse come back and win an off the turf race at Belmont at Saratoga. And that pace was honest going into that last race that he was in, where Rabaha was able to upset that field. And he didn't fade all that badly in there considering. So I think that this one really got that improvement when switching over to the turf.
Yeah, I agree with Master Freud, number 7 at 12-1. I like that this one's shortening up a little bit. I was curious. I almost wondered if this horse would be better shortening up or going longer. And I think, shortening up was probably the way to go. This horse has a little bit of early speed, and I think might appreciate this sort of setup that it's going to get on Saturday. My top pick was number 3, Quando, for Bruce Levin, and this is one at 5-1. And this is just another one. If you go back and look at the running lines, has just quite frankly faced better company, whether it was on the dirt or the turf. I mean, this horse has run against Society Man, who we saw finish second in the Wood and run in the Kentucky Derby. Reason Analysis, Ridgewood Runner, Malarchuk. I mean, even Unit Economics last time out was a very well-intended Chad Brown horse. So I just felt that this horse at 5-1 has been running against much better company, has good speed, love the cutback from routing to 6 furlongs. Whether or not this horse needs to get to the front in order to be successful, I'm not sure. And whether or not that routing early speed translates into sprint early speed is always a little bit of a question mark. But again, I just think the cutback in these spots makes so much sense for this horse. So really like that one at 5-1 as my top pick in this particular race. All right. Well, Sarah, we got through all 11 races. We didn't do it in 45 minutes like we were hoping. It took a little bit longer, but it's always good talking to you. You mentioned you're going to be at Horseshoe Indy. Are the good people going to be able to watch you on Fox Sports? Are you going to be reporting in on location?
I mean, that is the intention and the hope, certainly. I will be there for the full day, but it seems as though we'll have me touching base with races 4 through 12, of course, ending the day with that Indiana Derby. And we have an action-packed Saturday coming up, coverage from us, those graded stakes events that we just talked about, as well as some racing from Monmouth. And then we have some good old harness racing to close out the day. If you're burning the midnight oil, or you need to recoup on some of your misplaced wagers throughout the earlier portion of the day. So plenty of opportunities available this upcoming Saturday. But I will be spending my evening back at the hotel and hopefully with a couple of winning wagers as well in Indiana. And it'll be my second Indiana Derby. And it's weird thinking about missing 2 of the last 3 Belmont Derbies with where we currently work. But I mean, I think I'll be okay.
You'll be okay too. And I think you're going to be able to see a little fella by the name of Woodcourt that might make your day. So that'll be a lot of fun. Yeah, we'll see. But it should be a lot of fun there. Great day of racing out at Horseshoe Indy. So make sure to tune in to America's Day at the Races to get all of our coverage, not here just at NYRA, but obviously all of Sarah's stuff at Horseshoe Indy as well. Well, make sure to like this video. Make sure to subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube. And thank you so much for tuning in to this very first episode of Captain the Card. For Sara Elbadwi, my name is Matthew DeSantis. Wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races, and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.